Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSPmagazine. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
And hello, everybody. This is Sean Martin. I'm the host of Redefining CyberSecurity Podcast and ITSPmagazine. You probably know that already. What you don't know is that I'm doing a chats on the road to Black Hat. If you're watching this, you'll see that that's what we're talking about today. And it's a chance for myself and Marco, when he joins me, to kind of get a glimpse into what's happening at the event and other things around Hacker Summer Camp that week. And we get to chat with organizers like Steve Wiley and keynote speakers and other presenters and panelists and really cool people, one of whom is Eric Parizo. Eric, how are you?
Hey, Sean, how are you?
I'm great. It's good to have you on the show. And I'm thrilled because I get to go through an immense list of sessions and summits and activities and find the things that inspire me that I think others would want to hear about. And the summit you're running is definitely one of those. I was joking before we got started that I don't often get to go to those because they're Chatham House rules and they don't allow press in. So when I wear my press badge, I don't get to go. So I'm going to chat with you beforehand, and you can share what you want and hide what you don't want exposed. So very controlled conversation, but it should be exciting nonetheless, because I think you guys are doing some really cool things, and that session should be really fun. So before we get into that, though, a few words about who Eric is. What have you been up to? What's your current role, Omdia, and tell us a little bit about what you have going on.
Sure. Thank you again, Sean. Great to be with you. Eric Parizo, Managing Principal Analyst for the Omdia Cybersecurity Research Team. So I have a little bit of a dual role. I support our research director, Maxine Holt, in the management of our team and our research strategy. I get to focus on fun things like developing our amazing staff and identifying opportunities for research innovation. So it's a really cool role. And then in my quote unquote spare time, which is actually a lot of the time, I am also the lead analyst for our enterprise cybersecurity operations intelligence service, which is all things SecOps, all things threat detection, investigation, and response, everything related to the SOC. So all the solutions that SOC pros know and love, from SIM and SOAR and XDR, EDR, all the DRs, vulnerability management, visibility, the list goes on and on. So that's what I do in a nutshell. I've been here about 4 years now. I was previously with another research firm for about 4 years. And before that, for a very long time, I lived in your world, Sean. I was in media over at Tech Target, managing their search security website.
I love it. The good old days, I'll say. I used to contribute quite a bit to that. And if I'm not mistaken, that's probably how we know each other from way back when. But I'm thrilled to have you on today, and I'm going to just quickly make a point that you said you get to build a team to define how research gets done, and then sometimes you get to do actual research and analysis, and you started to list all these things, and just which I'm sure is a summarized list, is pretty long, and part of your job is to create more lists. And analyze things, which creates more lists and identifies
acronyms. Analysts have to create acronyms. It's in the job description.
Exactly, which is why I think this summit that you're putting on is so important. It revolves around budget, if I'm not mistaken. But kind of give us an overview of what the summit's all about, because I think there's so much for security leaders to kind of understand and deal with, that the topic you're gonna cover is super important.
Yeah, we're really excited about it. It's the third annual Omdia Analyst Summit at Black Hat USA. It's taking place Tuesday, August 8th. It's an all-day event at Mandalay Bay. Many people still don't know that Omdia is part of the Black Hat and Dark Reading organization. We're all one big happy family. So we're doing more and more of these kinds of crossover events where we do columns on dark reading and appearances like this at Black Hat. Our summit is an all-day event. It's really like our Super Bowl, where we get to show the world all of the great research that we've been working on all year long. Just about our entire research team is going to be there, about a dozen of us now. We just keep growing. And it's such an exciting agenda. We have a keynote from our research director, Maxine Holt, on the economic challenges organizations are facing from a cybersecurity standpoint amid the current economic uncertainty, and how organizations still may have, budget constraints, but ultimately still have to provide the best security for their organizations that they possibly can. So she's going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about a really interesting emerging trend called proactive security. It's a whole new category of security solutions that we think is going to be critically important to the industry going forward. And then my colleagues are going to present on a bunch of hot security topics, from SASE to IoT and OT security, data security, managed security services. And of course, you can't have a security event these days without talking about AI. So of course, we'll be talking about AI and cybersecurity as well. It's a packed agenda. We're really excited for it next week.
It sounds super fun. And when we're talking budgets, I had a conversation a few months back where we're looking at budgets, and one thing we didn't get to during that chat was kind of where the budgets are coming from. I don't know, do you see any shifts in how budgets are being allocated? Are they still contained within a cybersecurity group, or is there crossover into some of the other categories? Like we see the merge of developers and operations and security for DevSecOps. And do you see any shifts like that that are changing the way organizations think about their budget and how they fund things, and how perhaps even how the teams get fleshed out then?
Well, I'll give you some interesting data points, and these are based on our brand new 2023 Omdia Cybersecurity Decision Maker Survey. We'll be debuting the results at the Black Hat Omdia Analyst Summit next week. But just for you, Sean, I can give you a little teaser on some of the things
Little
we'll be
nuggets.
talking about. So first, we asked our respondents, how do you expect your organization's security budget to change in the next 12 months? And based on what we've seen, we see security budgets for the most part holding steady, actually increasing in a lot of cases. 85% of respondents told us they actually expect their security budgets to increase in the next 12 months. Only 2% said that they were actually expecting a decrease in their budgets. Now, that said, in times of economic uncertainty, which we appear to be in now, security always feels the pinch to a degree. And it's the classic areas. New purchases are delayed or pushed back, and demonstrating ROI and value to the business for existing spend becomes critical. So even though the data says that budgets are holding pretty strong, we're still expecting the realities of the growing uncertainty to take their toll in the second half of this year. Another interesting data point, we're starting to observe what we think is a long-term trend as far as how security spending is starting to shift. We asked our respondents, how does your organization resource certain types of initiatives? And when it comes to mission critical security capabilities, things like strategic planning, GRC, threat detection, investigation, and response. The majority of respondents said they continue to invest on internal capabilities to manage those areas. So they continue to do them themselves. However, when it comes to things like incident response escalation, really severe threats, and new security requirements, the majority of our respondents said they now resource those areas externally, either through consulting or ongoing services contracts. So to me, it highlights how the industry is changing. Over time, organizations are going to rely more on external security capabilities. We think this is going to be a pretty slow shift that occurs just a little bit over time, over the course of this decade. But it means that more and more security capabilities will be provided as a service. Hence, managed security services providers will only grow in importance, both to enterprises and as a revenue source for solution vendors. And also speaks to why managed threat detection and response specifically is so hot right now, which is another topic that my colleagues Adam Etherington and Jonathan Ong will be covering for us next week at the Omdia Analyst Summit.
Nice. And it brings to mind the other point that you made, and I don't know what you can share here, but certainly a definition I suspect you can share on proactive cybersecurity. When I hear that term, I immediately go to a point that I often or almost always make during my show, is that if we could actually just define the way we build stuff differently, we can reduce exposure, minimize risk, and perhaps even reduce the effort and workload for the security team. A good example is if there's a system that's constantly vulnerable because of lack of patches that need to be updated all the time, and your team is spending hours and hours updating that, perhaps there's a way to change that system out to be something different. So you're not wasting patching time. So I don't know if that fits into the definition of proactive security, or if it's more of the traditional detection protection.
Yes and no. That's a very specific take on
Yeah.
a specific capability that falls within proactive. But we think proactive is pretty broad, and let me explain it. So we define proactive security as the ability to find and address threats and threat conditions before they actually affect the organization. So before an adversary is taking them and using them to either try to get in or gets in and wreaks havoc within your organization. So the way we break down security solutions into three broad categories. So there's preventative, and those are the types of things that have existed forever. The firewalls, intrusion prevention, malware sandboxing, web gateways, the things that sit on the perimeter in most cases of your organization and prevent known expected threats from entering your organization. You need those capabilities, but they don't stop everything, right? Then there's reactive security. That's the second major category, where that's essentially everything TDIR, everything SecOps. It's the solutions you use to find, investigate, and fix threats that are already inside your organization. You need those capabilities too. But when you think about preventative and reactive, it means security pros, organizations, enterprises, they're always on their heels. They have to wait for a bad thing to happen for those solutions to really do any good. We believe proactive, this emerging area, is really the third area in what's kind of the missing piece to the puzzle of cybersecurity solutions. By having this class of capabilities that allows you to get ahead of security problems before an adversary is knocking on your door or banging down the door, that's going to enable your organization to prevent so many problems later in the attack life cycle, not to mention reduce the overall risk that your organization is facing. So we're going to look at that in some detail, talk about some of the specific types of proactive solutions we see out there, and why this is the precursor to a whole new type of solution category that we see called proactive security platforms, that's going to bring together a lot of different but related proactive capabilities into one solution set.
And I think in pictures, diagrams oftentimes, and this could either be linear or cyclical or Venn diagram. Which would you, or something else completely? Uh, how would you
Well,
depict that?
that's the exciting tease we're going to leave for our attendees at the Omdia Analyst Summit next
All
week,
right.
because we definitely have most, if not all, of the above ready to
Nice.
go.
Love it. So looking at budgeting, my experience with budgets in the enterprise is you often start with what did you do last year? That's kind of like the baseline. And you say we want to kind of keep things the same. We might want to adjust slightly. Um, but what's your view on that in terms of cybersecurity? Is that typically how budgets are formed? And if that's the case, how do you see the mindset needing to shift for something like a proactive security set of capabilities about to hit the space?
No, you're absolutely spot on, Sean, and it's one of the things that we do talk about in our session on proactive at the Omdia Analyst Summit next week, because proactive sounds great. It seems like the where the industry is going, but if you're a CISO and you hear that, it's like, okay, great, but now I have to go back to my board or my CEO or whoever controls my budget and say, I need a whole new class of security solutions in addition to everything you're already paying for. And when security is often, a non-starter because it's generally not a revenue producing element of most organizations, going in and asking for more budget is a real challenge, right? So one of the things that we recommend that organizations do is go back to their organization, start really thinking about what their cybersecurity architecture looks like, and see how many capabilities they really have that are proactive versus preventative versus reactive today, and start that long-term process, because Rome wasn't built in a day. Organizations aren't going to be able to massively shift their cybersecurity budgets from one year to the next, because you do have a lot of set costs, right? You have your staff, which is usually the biggest chunk of it. You have existing solutions that you've already invested in, often on multi-year contracts. You often have services agreements, whether it's consulting or just product updates, threat intelligence, and the like. So there's a lot of baked in cost in most year to year secure cybersecurity budgets that kind of just roll over from one year to the next. So we're advocating just start the process of thinking about it from a budget allocations perspective, and see how in the next few years you can start working to allocate more budget toward proactive, because ultimately we strongly believe that's where organizations are going to want to start moving significant amounts of spending. Just because, would you rather have solutions that stop threats at your door, help you find the threats that are inside, or preventing the threats from getting to you in the first place? So we're thinking that's an equation that's going to start shifting.
And speaking of equations, the output is something, right? You do some math and you get a result, which hopefully is meaningful and can be measured, and a collection of those outputs can tell a story. Do you see a change needed in the way we look at budgeting to tell the story to our leadership team and to the board? And does, again, proactive and some of your findings and the research you did say something needs to change on that front as well? How do we measure? How do we know we're spending the right stuff?
It's sort of, to me, it's a little bit, Sean, of a chicken or the egg problem, right? It's like, where does the cycle start? Do you look at your budget and say, I really don't like how this stacks up, I want to change some of these allocations? Or do you say, gosh, I really am not getting the performance I need, I'm not stopping the threats that are really impactful to my organization, I'm not getting to them as quickly and as efficiently as I need to. Um, I feel like it's a little bit of both, but usually it's more about, the problems that change or emerge that lead to changes in how the financial picture is allocated from a budget standpoint. So do changes need to be made? Sure, but I think the day-to-day, week-to-week, year-to-year reality for most CISOs is that they're under constant pressure from all sides. And I think the need to just to find a way to kind of usually scrape a couple nickels together to figure out how to pay for all the things that the budget doesn't afford anyway is sort of the biggest problem, with the long-term implications often kind of being secondary. Now, is that an ideal picture? Should most organizations be a bit more proactive and think about how their security budgets look 3 to 5 years from now? Absolutely, it would be to their great benefit to do so, because it'll make it easier to get ahead of these kinds of big changes that we see, like proactive security. But I think the reality is it's much, much harder to do that um, than it seems.
Yeah, and this is where I wish I could be in the room, because I can only imagine the conversations of all the levers, right? Because it's not, I'm going to staff, I'm going to buy tech, I'm going to run the program. It's it's all those levers, right? I have to communicate, and to your point that you just made, something changed. I'm under new pressure for something, and everything that I've defined at the beginning here for the budget, I'm not prepared for what just happened.
Yeah, and we
um,
haven't even spent
yeah,
a lot of time talking about compliance, and security
exactly.
still to a large degree is a compliance game, right? That's where a
Yeah.
lot of this budget comes from. It's enabling the ability for the organization to meet compliance regulations. So that is still, top of the board for a lot of organizations, and ultimately dictates where that budget goes.
Yeah. And so I'm afraid we'll start to get too deep into what what
I'm an analyst. You can never get too deep, Sean.
no, for trying to give things away for the session. But I think what I'll leave you with, and you can answer with yes or no or as deep as you want on this, but you mentioned it, so I'm gonna also say we can't have this conversation without talking about it at some level. AI. So clearly, AI has a role to play in the threat landscape. It has a role to play in the security technologies, presumably in the operations. My question is, what about? Or I'm sorry, the technology. My question is then, what about the operations and the team, and then ultimately the budget? Can AI help us help us with some of those questions of where should we be spending our money
It's
and
a
how?
really interesting topic, Sean. AI in cybersecurity, and particularly generative AI, to me is the number one trend across the entire cybersecurity landscape in 2023. I think the arrival of Chat GPT late last year kind of caught everyone off guard, because it was the first time people realized, hey, wait a minute, suddenly these AI capabilities can be operationalized in really interesting ways that nobody had really prepared for, and suddenly there were some implications that nobody was really ready to deal with. So it's been really interesting in 2023, kind of seeing all that come together. So now that said, there are things AI is good at, and things that AI is still clearly not good at, right? It's good at searches. It's good at especially complex searches, where you being able to use human language to run a complicated query and get really meaningful results. It's good at correlating, finding the pieces of data within certain parameters, and analysis and presentation, helping you find the needle in the haystack that in maybe in a way you didn't even know was there. But it's still not so good at things like automation and creativity, and definitely not at replacing how a human thinks, or the value that a flesh and blood human provides. So it's still early days, but we think a lot of organizations of all types should be um, thinking now, getting prepared for the coming implications of AI and cybersecurity. My colleagues, Kurt Franklin and Kiki Borodé, will cover that at the Omdia Analyst Summit at Black Hat next week. For now, I think we're only starting to see how AI is going to impact the cybersecurity industry. I'm more in the short term, frankly, I'm more concerned about it from an adversarial standpoint. I'm really worried about what attackers will be able to do when suddenly they have, the AI at their disposal to determine all the different possible avenues of attack and ways of attack relating to a new vulnerability they may have discovered. So I think there's going to be a lot of chaos in that regard in the short term. In the long term, I do see AI providing a lot of value, but I think it will primarily be in the context of most of the existing cybersecurity solutions we see today. So, for instance, again, I cover SecOps primarily. So I think you'll see AI have a pretty significant impact in solutions that help enterprises manage the TDIR lifecycle, threat detection, investigation, and response. Being able to more use AI to kind of conduct an investigation or orchestrate that initial part of the response where a certain type of threat comes in and the AI can automatically tell you, oh, this puts these certain types of endpoints at risk, let's put these mitigations in place to ensure that this threat doesn't become a problem until you can fully mitigate it. Things like that will increasingly be common within the context of security solutions. Are we eventually going to see kind of the massive, AI platform that does everything for you? Maybe someday, but I don't think it's on the horizon anytime soon.
Yeah, and the possibilities are limitless, it seems. As you're talking about some scenarios, I was thinking of 2 or 3 more. Not that I wasn't listening, but thinking of 2 or 3 more that could easily surface as really cool capabilities to help those teams. You covered one that I thought was really cool. Depending on what you're seeing, what controls or compensating controls or mitigations can you put in place to, again, prevent it from happening the next time?
Yeah, I mentioned that just because it's a pain point for many organizations still, right? You can detect threats, you can investigate them, but then figuring out, okay, what do I do? How do I actually stop this threat and fix it from being an impact to my organization? That's still where a lot of organizations fall down. So it's certainly the kind of thing that AI can really help with.
Yep. And the other one that comes to mind is that, back to the budgeting, given this set of parameters and levers that I've pulled, what story do I need to tell my team, my executive team, for what it is and why I need it? So sometimes it may be hard.
That's a great point too. We're going to see it there have an impact there as well in terms of being able to produce, using the same data to have AI automatically produce a report that helps your SecOps team understand the threat, but also help your CEO understand what the impact is to the business. Yep. That's going to be powerful too.
Yep. Lots of stuff to think about. And I get to talk about it, which is cool. You have to do all the crunching, which I think is cool too, but at a different level.
They let me talk about it a little bit too. I got the Omdia Analyst Summit at Black Hat next week.
That's right. That's right. Remind us when that is, Eric.
It's next week as part of Black Hat USA. It's taking place on Summit Day at Black Hat. So that's Tuesday, August 8th at Mandalay Bay.
Nice one. Well, I appreciate you being on the show and giving us some insights and teasing us with a few nuggets. I'll say it again. It's where the conversations are going to be held, where a lot of this stuff is going to make its mark in the budget and in the program. So great to have you on, Eric. Hope everybody enjoys the summit, enjoys the conference, and of course we'll link to the summit. I don't know what the registration status is, but at least they can learn about it and connect with you. And for those listening, we still have tons to go here with our coverage of Black Hat USA 2023. So stay tuned and subscribe, share, and have fun. Hopefully everybody's enjoying the coverage. Thanks again, Eric.
Thanks, Sean. Take care.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you learned something new and this story made you think, then share ITSPmagazine with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our columns. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.